Welcome to the Luxury Rental Doctor Show, where we help busy, high achieving professionals escape burnout and build wealth through luxury rentals. Today, I am so excited to be joined with Dr. Elaine Stageberg, physician turned real estate entrepreneur, the co founder of the Black Swan Real Estate Group. She is here to share with us how she was able to create financial freedom beyond medicine and how you can do the same. Welcome, Elaine. Goodness gracious, it is so great to connect back with you again.
I know. I'm so excited to be here. Our friendship and relationship goes back so many years, and it's going to be exciting to reflect on kind of a lot of, what you saw firsthand as I was really making the big transition out of medicine and into real estate full time, and excited to share the story and inspire some folks.
Okay, so I don't think you know this, Elaine, and I didn't even mention this to you in the green room, but of course, you and I were in a women's mastermind together. That's where we met initially. And I reached out to you because I knew you walked away from medicine. And I asked you, Elaine, how do I accomplish this? Like from an emotional perspective, because a lot of self-limiting beliefs. The financial side was there, but emotionally, I did not think I could detach from it. And you actually talked me through a process of how you just released the old Dr. Lane, you breathed in the new lane, you went to like the local subway. I think it was the subway. I was like,
Yes,
okay, this
yes. Your
right. Do you
memory's
remember that?
good.
So I had mapped that out in my head. I was like, okay, where's the subway by me? Okay, I'm gonna do that. It was hilarious. And truth be told, 30 days later, instead of 1 year, I told you I was mapping it out for a year. 30 days later, I walked away from medicine. I was like, enough was enough. But at least I had that conversation with you. I had the framework of how to do it because I really, really struggled. I struggled with that. So my question to you, Elaine, is as a physician and an entrepreneur, what was your light bulb moment that made you realize that, you know what, I need to step out of the traditional norm of what I had worked so hard to pursue?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Such an excellent question. I wouldn't say there was any one major light bulb moment. Maybe that's because I'm a
Mm.
slow learner. Maybe this is what we all go through. I'm not sure. But there was definitely, the light it was a dimmer switch, right? And the light was getting, brighter and brighter and brighter. A lot of it was I started investing even before I went to medical school. And so I
Mm.
had some sense, even before starting that very rigorous training, that what I was doing in investing created money even when I wasn't paying direct attention to it. Whereas the
Mm.
efforts that I was putting into medicine, I needed to pay direct attention to it, right? Through my schooling, through
Mm.
residency, through seeing patients. And I was able to really embody as I was building my real estate portfolio at the same time that I was going through my medical training, really embody the idea that in medicine, it would generally be an exchange of time for money, whereas in
Mm.
investing, it was more an exchange of expertise, risk, capital, the willingness to put together deals. And if I could exchange those things, it wasn't directly tied to time. So that was kind of
Mm.
happening all throughout as I was, building both my real estate portfolio and my medical career. I do remember there was a time where my husband and I had built a portfolio of single family homes. We had built that over like a 7-year period, and we had done a large cash out refi of like 30% of the portfolio. So we had like a little over $1 million, and we decided that that was going to be the money that we used to buy a multifamily property. We were really excited about townhomes. We felt like that was kind of the next step where we would get that economies of scale, but they still sort of operate and feel like single family residences. And I was at the site of a very big decision. My husband and I were deciding to write like a $10 million offer on a townhome community. We had never written an 8-figure offer before. And I needed to leave in order to get back to work to see patients, and just kind of luck of the draw. But I do think the universe gives a little nudges, just kind of luck of the draw. The patients I had on my calendar that afternoon, I was fairly certain were not actually going to show up, right? We all know when we're
Mm.
taking care of people, and I'm a psychiatrist by training, so I really learned their personalities. And I just remember driving back to the clinic and just sort of having this feeling that I was leaving behind the site of a major decision
Mm.
to go to a clinic to try to help someone become well who really wasn't even engaged with my help,
Mm.
right? And that I was leaving the site of advancing my own life
Mm.
to to engage in patient care that not all of the patients, don't get me wrong, many of them were
Right.
amazing, absolutely lovely human beings. But
Right.
that particular afternoon, that little nudge from the universe was,
Yeah.
I was fairly certain a lot of those people weren't actually going to show up because they weren't really engaged in their own care. That was definitely one of the like stakes in the sand. Um,
Mm.
the big moment for me, that moment at the Subway sandwich shop that you're describing there, it happened in 2020. At that
Yeah.
point, my husband had left his career in technology. I'm sure we'll talk through how we made that decision because I really feel like if someone is married, the first spouse leaving is kind of the bigger leap.
Yeah.
Um, so he was working full time in the business for about a year at that point, and COVID was raging. We had 3 children. One of them was born in April of 2020, so we had a newborn through COVID, and it just seemed like left and right I didn't have childcare because of quarantine and all of those things. And I just said, I am inflicting so much pain upon myself,
Mm.
trying to redo my schedule every couple of
Mm.
days when maybe I have childcare, maybe I don't, upon my children, wondering are they going to go to backup care or, what's going to happen with them when they weren't able to go to school because of COVID exposures. And then upon my patients as I was having to reschedule their appointments. And I sort of said to myself, you are financially free from your real estate portfolio. Why are you putting yourself through so much pain? Just take a step
Mm.
back. Step back for a year, let the COVID thing figure itself out. A vaccine will eventually come out, society will get back to normal, and then reassess. And that was that weeping conversation. I remember it so well. I was with my husband. We were in Subway. It was like the middle of quarantine in summer 2020. So we had the whole restaurant to ourselves. I'm wearing, a blue surgical mask, snot everywhere, which is no fun period, let alone inside of a mask, right? Um, and that was the moment. And I think when I look back on it, I'm so grateful that I had so much pain that forced me to
Mm.
make a decision. And when I made that decision, it was never this like grand proclamation of my life that I would never return to medicine or never see a patient again. It was just, hey, I've got these resources to step back. Let's do
Yeah.
it. Let's check in a year or so after this COVID thing starts to settle down,
Yeah.
and we'll
Yeah.
reassess then. And here we are today, now 5 years later, and I've been doing real estate full time the entire 5 years.
Oh my gosh, this is so good. And so the way you kind of painted the picture of inflicting so much pain on yourself, and I think it is we as women in medicine, right? We inflict so much pain on ourselves, and some of it is almost self-induced, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm picking up what you're putting down, Elaine. However, as physicians, dentists, pharmacists, we're often told, girl, stay in your lane when it comes to business. So, what would you say are some of the mindset shifts that were necessary for you to start seeing yourself as an investor or as an entrepreneur or as a business owner? What were some of those mindset shifts?
Two major ones come to mind.
Mm.
The first is, as I mentioned, I'm a psychiatrist by training, so I think a lot about how humans think, how we behave, right? How we affect change in our own lives. Humans are rarely motivated by information, right? We all can think of the
Mm.
things where we know what to do and yet we don't do it, right? We're rarely
All day.
motivated by information. We're
Mhm.
sometimes motivated by emotion. If we feel really happy about
Mm.
something, really sad, really angry, right? We might be inspired to take some action. But
Yeah.
we are really motivated by identity. When
Mm.
we believe I am X, I am Y, I am Z, we will go to great lengths to reinforce that identity in ourselves and in the eyes of others. And that's been kind of twisted on us a little bit in medicine because
Mhm.
we've been sort of brainwashed with this belief that we are only allowed to have a singular identity. I am a doctor, period, end of discussion, nothing else. You couldn't dare have any other interests, have any other professional experience, either in the
Mm.
past or something you want to do in the future. Heaven forbid you have a hobby, right? And that's just not true, right? We are human
Yeah.
beings. We are the most magical things that have ever existed in the universe. We can have an infinite number of identities and we can hold them at the same time, and we can prioritize or deprioritize them as we see fit as we go through our developmental stages. So as I was going through my life, as I mentioned, I was, building my portfolio at the same time that I was building my career in medicine. And so I was taking on more and more the identity. I am an investor, I'm a business
Mhm.
owner, I'm an entrepreneur,
Mm.
and I'm a doctor. And it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah.
And choosing to not engage in something on a daily basis doesn't deprive you of that identity.
Mm.
Let's say, like, I have 5 children, right? They're
Yes.
all young, they
You're a
live.
mom.
I am a mom.
Yeah.
Someday, my children will not live in my home. Hopefully, they are
Mhm.
all, independent, living on their own. Maybe they're living on a different continent, right? Maybe by then they're living on a different planet. Who knows? Just because I'm not mothering them that day doesn't deprive me of my identity that I am their mother.
Mm.
And so I was really able to step into the idea that I am a doctor. I will always be a doctor, right? Remember, MD, PharmD, whatever it is, PA, those are degrees, not
Yeah.
identities, right? You always have it, whether or not you're doing it on a daily basis. And that I could be a multifaceted person and I didn't have to sort of drink this like poison of brainwashing that I could only have one identity. Oh no, my friend, we can have hundreds of identities and we can live all of them simultaneously. Um, and the second, I forget. I was so moved by identity. Maybe it'll
This
come
is
back to me
so
in the course of
good.
our time here together.
That is A-okay. We can certainly circle back. So I wanted to get into the real estate portfolio side of things, and I do want to revisit the identity and balancing it all. So I'm trying to figure out where to go from here. But let's dive in. Let's go ahead and dive in on the real estate side of things. So you have built a massive real estate portfolio, you and your amazing husband Nick, and I look forward to having him on the show as well so that we can dissect and dive deep into the short-term rental side. Could you share with us what does that portfolio look like? What is it comprised of? And would love for you to unpack with me some of the biggest challenges you faced when in those early days of your journey.
Yeah, our real estate portfolio today, you're right. It kind of even defies my imagination. So we started with single family home investing in
Mhm.
2011, right when we got married. Today we have a portfolio of about 400 million in assets under management. We have single family homes, large multifamily communities, kind of everything in between. We principally do long term residential real estate. We have a little bit of like retail or office if it's part of a mixed use building, but we really focus on residential real estate. We're principally in Rochester, Minnesota, home of the Mayo Clinic. That's where I did my training in psychiatry, and we've built our portfolio here. And then we have a small portion of our portfolio in Tacoma, Washington, so that we can have some diversification. We principally do long term residential management. We have a small portion of our portfolio, our short term rentals. Really, we're focusing on medical tourism here in Rochester. So they're more like competitors to hotels as opposed to, say like vacation properties. We're vertically integrated, so we manage everything that we own. We kind of take care of most of the pieces in that value chain. So my husband is a real estate agent. We have a very successful real estate sales team. As I mentioned, we manage everything that we own. We do most of our own maintenance, facilities, snow care, lawn care, kind of you name it. We take care of our properties. We work with passive investors. We have about 500 passive investors that have invested in the company in our various private equity funds. And that's what has allowed us to scale over the last 10 years.
That's amazing. So when we first met, I knew you were doubling down on the single family homes and you had an entire model, which I love, the single family homes at scale. And
Mm-hmm.
you continue to grow and grow into multifamily and like you said, a variety of different verticals as well. So what were some of those initial challenges that you faced early on in your real estate journey?
Early on, I think it's just a matter of getting the repetitions in, right? Much
Mm,
like medicine, like we can spend years and years and years in the books, we can take all the
yeah.
tests, right? We can do all of that. But that moment when you step into an exam room or, you're laying hands on the patient, that's when it all is real, right? That's where you really figure out, what do I really know? Where are the gaps in my knowledge? What do I need to get hands-on experience? It's the same thing in investing. So we just dove in, right? Incrementally increasing our risk. We started, our first
Mm,
single family home was the home that I lived in before we got married. So that was a
mm,
nice, right, softball opportunity there. Then we acquired a single family home that we never lived in. We renovated that and had that as a rental, and then just kept doing more single family homes. The next thing you know,
mm,
we were doing 5 or 10 single family homes at a time. That's when we started
mm,
working with passive investors, because we had kind of built the train and we wanted to keep the train on the tracks, but we had run out of our own capital. So investors would invest in the projects. We would buy homes, fix them up. And then, as I mentioned, we had that turning point where we had done a large cash out refi. So we had a lot of cash on hand and wanted to move into multifamily. We first started with townhomes. Got a really amazing project where we were able to acquire 30 existing townhomes that were being operated
mm.
as rentals, and then 10 acres of land that over the last five
Wow.
years, we've built another 85 townhomes there. So we now have a community of 115 townhomes that we built over the last 5 years. Started moving into multifamily, kind of bigger and bigger assets, and just all the way through. For us, we're very hands-on, right? I
Mm,
love being hands-on. My husband loves being hands-on. We now dedicate, our full-time careers to building the portfolio and running the operations of the portfolio. Other people really prefer the passive route. They want the
mm,
financial benefits of investing in real estate, but are listening to the things that I'm describing and feeling a little sick to their stomach of like, but I don't want to do that. And that's okay
mm.
too, right? There's
Yep.
there's opportunities for passive investing, but just all the way through, never being afraid to do the work, never being afraid to get into the project. I've done almost every renovation you can do in a home once, which gives me a tremendous amount of appreciation for our renovation crews, our maintenance crews. Like, it's
Mm,
backbreaking hard labor.
mhm,
Again, I mentioned we're deeply vertically integrated, so really taking on
mm,
that ownership of looking
mhm,
at, how can we best optimize the operations of our portfolio. And none of that was easy, right? It's not like we
mm.
were born knowing how to run a maintenance company or born running, knowing how to run a lawn care company, but believing that we could do it. I
Yeah.
remembered my second thing from medicine. Let me bring it in here.
Yes, let's go.
Yeah, so I talked about identity. And then the
Yes.
other thing is, my gosh, the education that we get in medicine, right? We were talking about this right before we started recording,
Mhm,
right? What is the fundamental education in medicine?
mm,
It's getting a diverse body of facts from the patient chart, collateral, talking to the patient, physical exam, talking to other professionals, coming up with a differential, figuring out what the problem is, identifying what testing or things you might need to hone in on what the diagnosis is, explaining the diagnosis to the patient and their family, rallying the team and the resources, the nurses, the pharmacists, the respiratory techs, whoever it is, to help that patient with the care plan, and then repeating that over and over and over as you optimize the health of that patient, right? That's
yeah.
all investing is. That's all running a business is,
Mm,
right? You figure out,
yeah,
what's the problem I need to solve? What are all the different ways I could solve the problem? What's the best option? What resources do I need? How do I bring a team together? What do I need to check on to make sure that the plan is unfolding the way I want it to, right? What are my key performance indicators? And then
yeah.
you just keep iterating over and over and over. So, your statement a little while ago was, we're kind of told to stay in our lane. We
Yeah,
are in our lane, which is
literally.
solving complex problems.
Yeah,
Nowhere in our education is there like an asterisk that says, oh, but you can only apply this to the human body.
yeah.
No, we are problem solvers. We are trained to be excellent problem solvers, and that's basically all that investing in business is anyway. So we are in our lane.
Love that. Goodness. Full circle moment, Elaine. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. Okay, so I do want to revisit some of the real estate investing strategy as you continue to scale the portfolio. So it was single family at scale, right?
Mhm.
And I know you have a nice little chunk that's short term rentals, which is my sweet spot.
Mhm.
What intrigued you and Nick about short term rentals? What was that gap? perhaps in either the marketplace or where you saw the, economics were going, that identified to you, you know what, we should probably leverage some short-term rentals in our portfolio as well?
Yeah. So our portfolio today is about a third single family and then about two-thirds
Mhm.
large multifamily. And we
Mhm.
really have only brought short-term rentals into the portfolio over the last about, let's call it like 18 months.
Yeah.
And again, that came from pain, right? I hope the listener is
Oh,
understanding that, if you're experiencing pain in your life, like that is not bad. That is the universe
oh.
telling you like something needs to change, something needs to
Mm.
be optimized, you need to go a different route. Many of our greatest breakthroughs came from pain. So the pain
Mm.
we had in this situation is we had acquired a large building. It was the largest building in our portfolio. It was called at Discovery Square, 129 residential units,
Okay.
and the entire ground floor was vacant commercial space. The building had been
Mm.
constructed in fall of 2019. And then, of course, we
Mhm.
all know what happened in 2020. So that
Yeah.
space was meant for like a little pizza shop, a little coffee shop, maybe some little hair salons, right? Those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And when we acquired it in mid 2023, all of that space was still empty, right? The society was still recovering from the pandemic.
Yeah.
So we got approval from the city to change the zoning in that to residential. So we built
Mm.
residential units into that ground floor, right, which is our bread and butter, right? We were doing what we're experts in. And then here's the pain in that deal. So we had acquired that through a loan assumption. You may remember in
Mm.
2023, right? Interest rates were
Yeah.
going crazy.
Yeah.
And the existing loan on it was 2.8%. So we were
Love
going to
it.
do whatever it took, right, to get, I mean,
Yes.
we're talking, 20 plus
Beautiful.
million dollars of debt at 2.8% versus the prevailing interest rate at that time was like six and a
Yeah.
half.
Yeah, and it
How
was floating too.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
However, we knew
mhm.
we only had 18 months left on that loan assumption. So we knew
Oh,
we were under the clock, right? So we
okay.
got approval from the city, got the units built. That actually didn't take very long because we were just building units inside of an existing structure. And then we
Mhm.
knew we had to lease them and have seasoned financials so that we could do our refi for when that original debt that we assumed when it termed out. And we thought, how can we create essentially the largest lead funnel possible? Right. We
Mm.
already had a really robust lead funnel in terms of like Zillow and apartments.com and our own website and
Mhm.
those sorts of things for long term rentals. And then we said, well, wait a second. There's this whole group of people that are coming to Rochester, Minnesota for care at the Mayo Clinic, right? We are
Yeah,
essentially a tourist town in a way.
yeah.
And if we can grow our lead funnel with all of those folks, we can
Mhm.
fill these units so much faster. So we'll operate some of them as short term rentals, start to get all the bookings, start to get that income. We'll operate some of them as long term rentals, but we need to do whatever it takes so that we have the financials that we need to have in order to exercise that cash out refi at the end of that loan term, which was only 18 months. So
Gotcha.
that's why we went into short term rentals. And we spun up
Um,
50 short term rentals across the entire portfolio within a
I
year.
saw that on social. I was like, "Wait, what is she doing?"
Yes, yes,
I think you had, like, this whole, like, warehouse
we
of
did.
furnishings.
We did. We essentially had like our own IKEA with like beds everywhere and end tables and dishes and dishwasher pods and bedding. I mean, everything you need for spinning up 50 short-term rentals. We spun those up in less than a year. We were able to successfully execute our cash out refi on that building. And then we now have short term rentals across many of the buildings in our portfolio. And we're able to serve people kind of what we had built in our long term portfolio. Is we were able to serve people all the way from a studio apartment up to a 4-bedroom home. And then if they even wanted to move on for home ownership, we had our real estate sales teams. We could click them into there. So we kind of had the full spectrum of
Wow.
housing. And now what we have is we can serve you if you need a one night stay or you need a multi year lease. So we can do any type of housing for any duration.
Mic drop. So many mics. So many mics were just dropped there. Now the wheels are turning for me as well because I'm cooking up a few things on the side. I love the vertical integration. And what a lot of the listeners are probably thinking, "Oh my gosh, how do I get to Elaine status today?" No, 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 she didn't get here in one day, guys,
Correct.
right? It was incremental. You built incrementally. You started off with a property at hand that you were living in. And
Mhm.
so when my docs come to me overwhelmed, I'm like, "You don't own a home yet. Use a doctor's loan and get a
Mhm.
0% down and own your first home. Add a little casita, a little accessory dwelling. Let's start with baby steps, and who knows where you'll be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now." So, thank
Mhm.
you for painting that picture. Now, I'm curious about another thing. I'm just going off our little, pre-prescribed outline. So, Elaine, as you're integrating vertically, and maybe we can level set. First of all, what is vertical integration for those who are just like, what are you talking about? And then could you paint a picture for us? Are you acquiring these businesses, or are you building them from scratch essentially? But first, let's start with what is vertical integration?
Yeah, so vertical integration is when you control all the pieces or as many pieces as possible of the value chain. So let's think about a real estate transaction, let's say of a large apartment community.
Yeah.
Someone needs to be the broker. So we serve as the broker. Someone needs to own the property. We are the owner through our private equity funds. Someone needs to be the management company. We manage all of our properties. Someone needs to do maintenance. We don't do all of our maintenance, but I say we do all of kind of the handyman type work. We don't have a licensed electrician or plumber or HVAC or roofer, those sorts of people on staff. We still do vend that out.
Yeah.
Someone needs to clean it and take care of general facilities. So we now have facilities. Someone needs to mow the lawn. Someone needs to remove the snow. And then
Yeah.
on and on and on. Pieces of the vertical integration chain, for example, that we don't have would be, say, property insurance. We could create our own property insurance company, but we would need so much liquidity in order to meet all of the compliance guidelines and all of that. So for example, we use a third party, right? We use State Farm. So if
Yeah.
it's in-house, that's vertical integration. And if it's third party, that's not vertical integration. So when we say hire a licensed plumber, that's outside of our vertical integration. But when
Yeah.
we send our handyman to do a unit turnover, do some painting, take care of some flooring, fix a leaky faucet, that's vertical integration. We only service with those businesses our own portfolio. So we don't, for example, provide maintenance for properties that we don't own. We don't, mow lawns in the broader community. And so we did build each of those from scratch.
Yeah.
And really what we looked at, and we built them one by one. You're absolutely right. Like this did not just come out of the sky overnight. This was, one by one over the last 15 years that we've been building this portfolio. Um, we've always managed all the way from the beginning. That was kind of by accident. It was the home that I had
Mm.
previously lived in. And I'm like, hey, I know this home pretty well. I know the
Yeah.
maintenance pretty well. I was living here, and it happened to be just 2 miles from where my husband and we moved into the home that he owned. So we're like, I don't know, I guess we can self-manage it. And so that was just this like beautiful accident from the universe that we started with self-management and then we kept that all the way through. And then as we built in, say, maintenance, facilities, lawn, snow, we essentially just looked at the areas on our P&L that were the most expensive. And we said, how can we remove this third party
Mm.
cost, right? Because if you
Yes.
hire a maintenance company, well, they exist to make profit, right? So if you can keep that profit at the asset level instead of hiring a third party vendor where they're getting the profit, then you can optimize your expenses. And because real estate is valued based on NOI and cap rate, you can optimize the value of your multifamily buildings by minimizing expenses by bringing these service lines in house. And we run essentially all of those service lines at a break even. So we're able to pay salaries, insurance, equipment, right? All of the things that we need to have a functioning service line, but we run them essentially at a break even so that the profit stays at the asset level because real estate is valued based on cap rate and we're in about a 5 cap market. So that's a 20x multiple. If that was confusing to the listener, just pause and go learn about cap rate and come back and that'll make sense. So for every dollar we can save on, say, a maintenance ticket or someone to mow the lawn or someone to remove the snow, we grow the value of our buildings by $20. And so that's why we've decided to do vertical integration. And then it also allows us to do it at our quality level, on our timeline, with the communication that we want for our residents. We don't have to worry about getting a call of, the snow vendor ran over my lawn and I'm upset. Well, we are the snow vendor, right? So we don't have to make multiple calls and what happened and send pictures and calling the snow vendor and trying to get their side of it, right? And all of that administrative headache. Instead, we just decided we would bring all of that administration in-house, hire our own teams to manage our buildings, to maintain our buildings, take care of lawn, snow cleaning. That's vertical integration. And we've built that over the last 15 years.
Love that. Love that. Now, something you mentioned a couple of times, and I jotted this down, was medical tourism. So, inside of the short term rental world, we talk about the different guest avatars or your ideal client avatars. And for the short term rental, we have the touristic destinations, the vacation rental areas. For midterm rentals, we have the insurance policy holders or some of those who are more well versed with the travel nurses. But something we don't often talk about is the medical tourism. Could you give us just a high level overview of what that is and the type of people who are seeking a short stay because they are leveraging the local medical facility in that area?
Yeah, that is an excellent question because as we were building our short term rental portfolio, right, we had a lot of experience with long term rentals. We had
Yeah.
basically no experience with short term rentals. Interestingly, we have a very large private equity fund, and many of our investors do short term rentals. So we would call them up and we would say, teach us how to do short term rentals because essentially we're using your dollars for it. So help us out, and that'll help us get better returns for you. And what I quickly figured out was a lot of the lessons that these people were trying to teach us, they really applied to like mountain homes or beach homes or vacation
Mm,
destinations, and they didn't really apply to our market here in Rochester, Minnesota. So our ideal client is someone who is coming to Mayo, right? They're often coming for a second, third, fourth opinion. It's
mm,
usually an emotional trip, right? They're
mm,
bringing their like main caregiver or support. If it's their first trip to Mayo, it's probably pretty emotional. It's maybe pretty scary. Maybe
mhm,
they're coming sort of hoping for good news, hoping for a plan. There's a lot of uncertainty.
yeah,
Maybe they're used to coming back to Mayo, and so it's sort of become part of their like regular routine that they'll come back once per year or something like that. But it's definitely not a vacation.
right.
And these people are generally spending dollars out of their household budget that's coming from their vacation budget, right? So
Yeah.
every dollar they spend getting to and being in Rochester might mean a shorter summer vacation with the kids or fewer Christmas presents or whatever it is. So they're very cost conscious. They're
Mhm,
looking for comfortable housing. They want more than a hotel room. They want space to have a few family members if they, need care or they want someone to attend those appointments with them. Maybe they have some needs, where they need a kitchen, for example, those sorts of things. They want comfortable places to sit. So,
yeah.
they're convalescing, right? They want to be able to watch TV and those sorts of things. So we really have to think about how can we create units that are cost conscious, that are very comfortable, and then
Yeah.
couple that with a high level of customer service and a deep knowledge of Mayo Clinic, of what it's like to come to Mayo, how the appointments work, how navigating everything works. Like, for
Mm,
example, when you come to Mayo, on your first day, let's say it's a Monday, you
yeah.
generally meet with sort of the lead physician. They learn about why you're there. And then they decide, okay, it sounds like you need to see a neurologist and a dietitian and a nurse for this, and then do this procedure. And then you get those appointments. So you don't really know how long you're going to be in town.
Mm,
That's interesting, right? When you're renting
yeah,
short term units, right?
yeah,
So, for example, one of the things that we did is we do multi unit inside of Guesty, and we furnish all of our units exactly the same with almost exactly the same art. We're trying to make them like comparable to a hotel room so that
yeah.
the software can click in, okay, this guest needs to extend and they can stay, and we can just automatically move this upcoming reservation to a different unit that's furnished exactly the same way. It's in the same building, it's just on a different floor or whatever.
Mhm,
So we had to think about, how do we have a population that's cost conscious, that wants comfort, that's coming here, they're not excited necessarily, right? This isn't a
mm,
vacation. They're a little bit nervous, they're a little bit overwhelmed. Um, and that we need to be very flexible with when they arrive, when they leave, if they extend, when they're coming back. And so we've had to build our machine around that. And I'm sure, my husband will come on and, talk all about, the very specifics in a special show with you.
Yes.
But thinking about that, building our software around that, building our units around that, furnishing our units around that, building our marketing around that, our customer service team for our particular client. And we had to know that about who we were attracting so that we could build that.
Mm. So good. So good. And what I love about this conversation is it's going to be very market specific, very
Mm-hmm.
guest specific. And so for those of you who are in a market with a world renowned hospital like Mayo Clinic that offers those services, hopefully you have the wheels turning in your head as how can you serve these clients at the highest possible level. There's some huge cancer centers throughout
Mm-hmm.
the United States. So definitely think about that. So thank you for breaking that down for us. Okay, so we've referenced Nick a couple times. So you have a whole husband. I like to say I have a whole husband, right? You have a whole husband. You have five kiddos. You've got this banging portfolio, and you've essentially built an amazing, successful business. And I remember when we were in a pod together in that women's mastermind, you were very intentional about balancing it all or creating that harmony between all the things. So, can you share a couple of tips, tricks, or systems that have helped you to have a smooth life and a smooth transition, as if there's such a thing? But are there some habits or systems that you have implemented that has made an impact for you?
Yes, I am evangelical that people should have help,
Yes.
especially women, right? Another sort of brainwashing that many of us have gone under is, well, I don't want other people raising my children, or I'm not a good wife if I don't take care of the house or cook all of the meals or whatever. Listen, if you enjoy doing those things, do them. Most people don't. Most people don't enjoy laundry, don't enjoy cleaning. They don't necessarily want to cook every single meal, chop up every single vegetable, mow every single lawn. So even early on in our journey, like when we had very little income, but I thought about how can we spend this income, right? Remember, I was building the portfolio, doing my medical training, and having children all at the same time. And so quickly I realized, hey, if I can spend some dollars having someone come in to clean the house, having someone come in to take care of errands around the house, those sorts of things, then I can moonlight, right? And I can make so many dollars per hour moonlighting. So every hour of help that I have is essentially an investment in my own earning power. And then I've just continued that to this day, right? That's why I have a team of 50 full-time employees here in Rochester, 30 in Tacoma, like 20 virtual assistants that are supporting the company at all times. In my personal world, we have like 4 different nannies. We have cleaners that come 3 times a week, a chef that prepares all of our food. And that might sound a little like, oh, it must be nice to be Elaine. I built that over time. And I'm very strategic that the hours that are freed up, domestically free me up to be a better entrepreneur, to serve our investors more. I launched a whole new business over the last year and a half. Because I had some space in my mind and in my calendar to do so, to be very present with my children and my husband when I'm home, right? I'm there with them. I'm at the dinner table with them. I'm not worried about the dishes and those sorts of things. Get help. Get as much help as you can afford.
Mm.
Use that time to then reinvest in yourself. In the beginning, it might be moonlighting, picking up shifts, right? Kind of earning back that income. That's okay. Eventually, it can be, hey, those hours I'm using to build my business, build my investment portfolio, right? Further my own financial freedom. And then also just taking care of your own self, right? It's okay. You have to fill when you were running, right, at full tilt, you have to constantly be pouring into your own cup so that your cup can overflow. So maybe some of that time is used to get a massage, go do a meditation, go get a pedicure. Not only is that okay, that is what you need so that
Mm.
your cup can overflow to build
Yeah.
all of these different areas of your life that you want. Um, and it started, when I was in residency. We had she was a teacher at our children's preschool. She came over 3 nights a week for about 3 hours. So it was about 9 hours of care. At that time, we paid her like $20 an hour. I was able to moonlight and make substantially more than that, right? So I could moonlight, 1 8-hour shift per month, and that would pay for her, wages for the entire month, right? She's still with us to this day, 7.5 years later. She's a core part of our family team. And then I just built over time my home team.
Love that. Love that. Oh my gosh, that could be a whole episode that we can go back and like building out your entire home family team because you're running a whole economy out of your household. Essentially, you've got these folks that are helping you out, but you're helping them as well, which I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely love.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing, amazing. So you don't have to be who are the superstars, right? You don't have to be Taylor Swift or
Mm-hmm.
some celebrity to make something like this happen, starting small,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Hiring just a cleaner. For me, hiring a cleaner initially was the unlock. I was like, oh, I don't have to sweep my floors.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, I want more of this. Oh, so
Mm-hmm.
you mean people can cook in in
Yep.
my house?
Yep. And
So yeah.
And I have found that the novelty never wears off. We've had the same cleaning crew. They come 3 times a week. They've been coming for about 3.5 years, and they come Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and there is
Mhm.
not a Monday, Wednesday, Friday where the moment I step across that garage, I'm like, "This is nice. This is nice." The novelty never wears off.
It
It is
doesn't.
enjoyable to this day.
It doesn't. It doesn't. Oh my goodness. So are you ready for some rapid fire questions,
Let's do
Elaine?
it. Let's do it.
Okay, so can you share a moment where you felt completely burnt out and how you overcame it?
Really that story I shared earlier in our time
Mm,
together through COVID. I had just had a baby in April. I was, left and right. I like learned to be fearful of my phone because it was always daycare calling saying someone's had an exposure, they can't come back for 10 days, and child 2 and 3, their 10 days starts on child 1's day 10. And I mean, I would just sob. Like, how is this possible? I have 3 children. I can't take them out of the house for the next 20 days. I've got a calendar full of patients. Like, how can I possibly do this?
mm,
And then I decided that I didn't have to, that I
mm,
could step back, that I had built the portfolio, and that I could reassess, right? That the pain required me to make a change. And I'm
mm,
so grateful for that pain.
mm.
And my hope is that if someone's listening and you are feeling just in the thick of burnout and you're like, I don't know how I can do this another day, ask yourself, what can I do differently? And do it.
Yeah, love that. What is a tool or a book or resource that you're loving right now that's changing the perspective on your life or work?
My all-time favorite book of all time is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. Highly
Mm,
recommend it for everyone. Essentially, a finite game is like a football game, a basketball game. There's a set number of players, a set number of rules. It's known how the score works. There's a set amount of time on the clock. When the game's done, whoever has the most points wins, it's over. An infinite game is kind of the opposite of all of that.
mm,
Everyone is a player. There's no real set rules. There's no way to win the game. The point of the game is to keep playing the game and to get other people
mm,
playing the game at a high level. That's what I think of when I think of real estate investing, when I think of business, when I think of serving our passive investors, when I think about what you're doing with this podcast, right? Bringing other people into this amazing world and saying, let's play the game together. Let's do this at a high level. Let's create abundance for all of us. That's
yeah.
the central thesis of Infinite Game. It is a book and a concept that has completely changed my life. I highly recommend it for every single person.
That's going in the Audible today. Thank you.
You will be moved by it. Yes, Simon Sinek is phenomenal.
Yeah, yes, the power of why, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, love that. All right, what's the craziest real estate story you've heard or experienced?
Oh my gosh. So, I'll keep this one tight. So when we first moved to Rochester, we bought a duplex, and
Mhm,
that duplex had been owned by a husband and wife. They had lived in half of it and then rented out half of it for income. And he had passed away like 30 years prior when they were like in
mm,
their 50s, and she was now in her 80s,
mhm,
frail, kind of vulnerable little old lady. And as circumstances would have it, she had moved in a person to the other side of the duplex who had wasn't taking very good care of the place. um, And then all of a sudden she was having kind of these unexpected falls and
Mm.
bruises and other things that just were really quite suspicious. And so, an important part of the story is Nick was born and raised in Rochester. So we had some of these relationships for a long time, even though we had just relocated to Rochester for my residency. So a family friend that had known Nick in his childhood reached out and said, "Hey, I know you guys are interested in real estate investing. Do you think you could help her out? Do you think you could acquire the duplex and she can then use those dollars to move on to like nursing home care or assisted living care, those sorts of things?" And so we started getting the lay of the land in our due diligence. And it seemed pretty evident to us that the person living in that half of the duplex was, actively trying to hurt this lady, potentially to sort of like take over the property. I'm not exactly sure. So we acquired that property. We vacated that resident. That was back when we were doing all of our own renovations. So we would work on that property on nights and weekends. And there was an evening where Nick was there alone, and this person and her boyfriend came and were like deeply threatening him, like he was fearful for his life, like a very scary situation. He was able to diffuse that situation, came home safe. It was really after that we started working with contractors and said, we are always going to have a team. Like, we may still be there guiding the renovations, but we're always going to have a team with us. And as it turns out, that person was wanted for aggravated assault, aggravated robbery of a different person, right? But had a long criminal history. That person ended up being arrested, ended up going to prison, is still in prison to this day. But that was
Whoa.
scary. That was a real, and that was a real moment for us, where we had to say, how committed to this are we really? And we said,
Yeah.
we are very committed. We said, it's unlikely things will ever be this bad. Again, we're grateful that the bad happened early. It can't ever be this bad for the rest of our journey. Um, it showed us our grit. It showed us that we could problem solve. We modified some things. Right after that, we started working with contractors and having teams in our properties. But it really, even though it was really scary, I'm so grateful for it, because everything that happened after that, like, oh, you tear into a wall and it's a little worse off than you thought it would be, or you try to save the cabinets and turns out you can't, like, none of that's a big deal. That's just business as usual.
Right.
Like, we'll just handle that, right? If
Yeah.
we're not being, threatened with physical
Right.
assault and potential murder, like, we can survive another day. So that was crazy. I wouldn't go through it again, but I'm grateful that we did. And that little old lady moved into nursing home care. She lived there for another 4 years, had a very nice end of life, and was safe.
Wow. Goodness gracious. This has been a wild ride. This conversation has
Every
been so
other
inspiring.
deal was so much more normal than that. Like, I don't want
Right.
the listener to think, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to potentially get murdered to do real estate investing. That's
Yeah.
generally not how it is. We've done,
Yeah.
at this point, thousands of deals. We've never been in physical danger besides that one. But you asked for the craziest story. And
I
so
asked for
there
the
it is.
craziest. There we go. Elaine, how can the people learn more about what you do, how to connect with you and Nick? Where should they go?
Our website is meetblackswan.com, and we have all sorts of resources there. You can learn more about us, about the portfolio, about passive investing alongside us, sign up for our newsletter. We do a monthly teaching call called Community Power Hour, where we teach on a various real estate investing or mindset topics. So all of it's right there at meetblackswan.com.
Awesome. And we will include that in the show notes. Elaine, this has been absolutely amazing. Your journey is such an inspiration. And I know our listeners are walking away with some amazing real estate strategies to take action. So, to everyone tuning in, remember, financial freedom isn't just about the numbers, that's important too. However, it's about really reclaiming your time, it's about you having choices and reclaiming your life. Elaine's story really resonated with me. If it resonated with you, I pray that you take your first step today. Until next time, I'm Dr. Rachel Gainsborough. This is the Luxury Short Term Rental Show. Keep investing in yourselves and in your dreams. Bye bye.